UFC 149, Faber versus Barao is going down in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, despite the best efforts of the injury gods. You're listening to the Hot Cage podcast. John Franklin, co-editor of the Hot Cage Daily, here with TJ Craig. TJ, what's up?
Hey, how's it going?
All right, so let's before we get into UFC 149, which is going to be a good card, which has changed significantly since its its inception, if you will. Let's go ahead and we'll hit the headlines of what's going on in the MMA world, everything that's happened since the last time we got together. So let's start with the UFC on Fuel TV 4 card. Just to give it a rundown, we're going to talk about basically just the main fights, and let's hit what the better fights of the night. So looking at the card, the big fight of the night was Chris Weidman against Mark Munoz. It was the KO of the night. So what were your thoughts on that fight, and what do you think? I think you had Munoz in that fight. I had Weidman. Not that we're keeping track, but what'd you think about that fight?
What fight? Because obviously it wasn't a fight. Have you looked at the punch stats on that thing? Wow, Weidman came in and pretty much dominated the whole first round. You know, he looked great. Came out the second and just finished the fight. I mean, there's nothing else to say about it. I'm kind of speechless because the kid looked really good. Came in there, was kind of an underdog. Everybody was talking about Munoz, how he was going to get the shot if you get past him, you know, and Munoz just got, it was like a deer in the headlights, man. He didn't know what to do. And if it has anybody seen the pictures of the next day, you can tell he got hit by a Mack truck. Good for Weidman. I mean, he stepped up to the plate. It was a big fight for him. He dominated, and as soon as he did, and what did he do? He called out Silva. I thought that was pretty good.
Yeah, and that's the thing that you got to understand is that this guy's from a camp where they run their mouths, and that's not a bad thing necessarily. He's from Serra Longo camp. Matt Serra's never been short on words, and neither is Chris Weidman. I mean, he's legit, and he says, all these guys, they keep saying they want to test their skills against Anderson Silva. I think that I match up great with him, and I think I can take him out. And he didn't waste any time, calling out Anderson Silva. Now, ever since then, we've seen in the weeks, after that fight, Anderson Silva doesn't seem to have too much interest in fighting Chris Weidman. UFC doesn't seem to have much of an interest in Chris Weidman and Anderson Silva fighting each other. So where do you think that leaves them next?
Weidman's just going to have to keep fighting the top contenders until they give him the fight. He is young, and that's probably the only thing against him is he hasn't had a lot of big fights. So what are you going to call Munoz fight? Well, to me, it was a domination. So I think you throw him one more opponent in there, and see how he measures up, and go from there. Now Silva, on the other hand, I believe he's calling out Rockhold. He wants to see some of that. And a couple other fighters, but Silva. To me, Silva's going to pick who he wants to fight.
Yeah, and at this point, I mean, he's probably he's earned that right. So he's gonna go look for money fights. He's going to look for guys that he can fight. Again, I don't want to get too far off on the Anderson Silva thing. I guess my bigger question for you is do you think Chris Weidman deserves a shot at Anderson Silva?
I would not right now. I would say get him another fight. Let's see how he performs. Munoz was no match for him in this fight, and nothing against Munoz. Don't get me wrong, because I think Munoz is going to be back and be right there in the title hunt. So don't disregard that. I just think Weidman had a better day. He had a game plan. He stuck to it, and he dominated. So I'd like to see him with another top contender, and let's go from there. You have a big fight coming up tomorrow night that we'll talk about here in a while. Maybe he gets the winner. I don't know. We can do something like that.
And that makes a lot of sense. I don't know where Anderson Silva's at injury-wise, but honestly, I think they may have dropped the ball. I think they, and again, we're going to pay very close attention to this on the post show because Dana White has said in the pre-fight press conferences there's going to be big announcements on Saturday night with regards to the middleweight division. There's been speculation online that may mean that there's going to be a middleweight tournament. I couldn't see that. What I think should have probably happened was he probably should have had Brian Stann fight Alan Belcher, give Weidman Bisping, and give Anderson Silva a little bit of time off.
Right.
and then have those winners kind of figure it out. If Weidman beats Bisping, there you go. But then again, where does that leave Hector Lombard? So maybe Lombard gets the first shot, and then the winner of Weidman Bisping gets the second one. Maybe that's what they'll say. So anyway, I don't want to spend too much time on this now because we have other podcasts that we can do that with. I want to touch on the fight of the night, which is James Tahuna and Joey Beltran, and then the submission of the night, which is Alex Caceres over Demasio Page. So Tahuna and Beltran, what were your thoughts on that fight? I mean, I thought they were setting Tahuna up for a fall, and it looks like that's not how it played out.
I mean, Tahuna came out and was battling, and I mean, it was a great fight. It was back and forth. I mean, I don't know what else you would want to see in the fight. Why do you think it was fight of the night? I mean, it was great. I mean, it was, well, here comes Tahuna. Well, here comes, sorry,
Beltran.
I forgot about Beltran. And it was just back and forth. And I was like, this is going to be a great fight. I didn't know who was going to pull it out and win. It could have gone either way. I really did think Beltran would have won that fight, but he didn't. But hey, the way they fought, it could have gone either way.
And that's the good thing I like about now that we're kind of bringing fight metrics more into our podcast, just in terms of using the statistics and quoting them. When you look, I mean, it really looks like as we're looking at the Weidman Munoz numbers, 28-0 in strikes. Weidman had 2 takedowns. I mean, that's a no-brainer. But I mean, even in the Tahuna Beltran fight, you're seeing Tahuna 122 strikes to 73, takedowns 3-1, passing of guard 1-0, and you see these numbers, and it starts to make a little bit more sense when you're starting to piece together these decisions, and you see the actual stats. They say the numbers never lie, and I don't think they tell the entire story of a fight, but it's hard to argue with them, right?
Oh, absolutely. You can't really argue with the numbers, and it's funny though, because when you get watching the fight on TV or if you're live, you get caught up in the fight. So you're not really watching to see what the judges or who's taking counts of the strikes, the takedowns, the submission attempts. You're not counting that yourself because you're entertained by the fight. But if you go back and you break it down, you look at the stats, and then you start watching the fight a little bit different, then things start to come around for you. And then you might have a little bit of a different opinion. You might see where it broke down, where one fighter or the other broke down a little bit, and it makes a lot more sense.
All right, so real quick, just to kind of put a bow on this card, there's 2 other fights I want to touch on, and we're going to touch on them together, and that is 2 bantamweights, T.J. Dillashaw defeating Vaughn Lee, which was kind of a surprise in the way that he did it as quickly as he did it. First round, 233 of it, and then Alex Caceres beating Demasio Page. He actually got submission of the night, but they're both bantamweights. They're both former Ultimate Fighter guys. Was there one guy you were impressed with more than the other, or what do you think?
I was probably more impressed with T.J. Dillashaw, but this is probably, I'm going to go back, Team Alpha Male. They've been training. Faber has a fight coming up. Dillashaw just had a fight, so those guys at that gym were just rocking and rolling, getting pumped up. I mean, it's a title fight that might be coming to the gym, so they're putting everything in. So I think he was just a little bit more prepared. He'd been scrapping with all those guys, Alpha Male, getting Faber ready, getting himself ready. So when you have top contenders at that weight classes, I mean, look at Team Alpha Male. Those guys in those weight classes are dominating right now. So I mean, you have the best competition right at your back door. That's where I think he came out on top.
And and sometimes you want to read the tea leaves, you want to read the writing on the wall and see what it is that's leading to what you can guess about one fight from what you've seen of other ones. I'll just say this quickly. Chad Mendes ran right through Cody McKenzie, and I mean, they probably shouldn't have been fighting, but that's neither here nor there. T.J. Dillashaw finished Vaughn Lee pretty quickly. I'm not saying that's kind of what we're going to see with Faber, but I mean, that's maybe what's coming out of that gym right now, like you said.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I think. I mean, those guys are pumped up. Faber is going for a title fight, and when you have that much excitement in your gym and when you're that strong and when you're on a winning streak, I mean, what else is going to put you down? You're already coming in the ring confident. All your boys won not with ease, but they won considerably in their matches.
Well, they both made statements. We can say that, right?
Yeah, well, absolutely. When they make statements like that, what do you think you're going to do when you step in the ring from that same team? You're going to make a statement. And
you're the alpha of the alpha males. I mean, he's the top dog in that gym.
Right.
You know what I mean? So he's getting a little bit on in years, and his maybe his best days are behind him, but we don't know that yet. But you know, he's looking to make a statement. I mean, he's really looking to say, let's not forget who the top alpha is here at Alpha Male. You know.
Right.
All right. So
right.
yeah, that's pretty much what was going on UFC on Fuel TV 4. That was July 11th in San Jose. So now we're going to move on and talk about the Strikeforce card. It was July 14th out in Portland. The main fight was the Rockhold Kennedy fight. You know, Marquardt Woodley was another fight. Roger Gracie versus Keith Jardine. It was a good card. I mean, Strikeforce has the advantage that they don't do these cards all the time. And again, when we start getting into having some scrums and stuff, we'll talk about these things more, these issues within mixed martial arts. But Strikeforce, the one thing they have going for them is they can stack these cards because they don't do them all the time. So let's first talk about the Rockhold Kennedy fight and your thoughts on that.
Well, beginning of the fight when they came out, I mean, there was no feeling each other out. I mean, those two guys went right at it. Rockhold was the bigger fighter, and but I thought Kennedy was what it was going to seem was Kennedy was going to try and take him down, work a little bit of ground pound, and go from there. He struggled through the whole fight. Kennedy did. He just couldn't find his range. He couldn't find any takedowns. Rockhold was stuffing him. Wasn't Rockhold's best performance, but I think you perform as good as your opponent. And that night, Tim Kennedy just wasn't the best opponent for him. I saw some people say it was close rounds, but I went back and watched it 2 more times, and I just didn't see it. Rockhold dominated the fight from the beginning to the end. I think I gave Kennedy 1 round out of it, but that was it. The rest of the time, it was Rockhold all over him. And I don't think he was too impressed by his own victory, and but I think he'll come back bigger and better on his next fight.
Yeah, and the thing that I noticed, I mean, I listened to Luke Rockhold talking to Ariel Helwani after the fight, and he said he was upset with himself, and you know how some of these guys are. Rockhold's one of those really, you know, the thing that kind of made Forrest Griffin run out of the ring is he said he was disappointed in his performance. We've talked about that already, so I won't retouch it. But that's what Rockhold said. He said, I want to finish. I want to be a top level guy, and I think that he was kind of a little disappointed with himself. But you know, you got to take what the other guy's giving you on some level, and you got to roll with the punches.
Yep, and no doubt he is the best 185 in Strikeforce. There's no doubt about that.
All right, so before we move on in terms of that card, where do you think Luke Rockhold fits in the big picture of the 185-pounders in the world?
I would give him. I'd say he's top 5. I mean, he wants to rematch. Well, he wants to fight Suarez next, and I think that would be a good matchup to really tell us. But right now, I'm still going to put him at the top 5 in the world. He's a big boy. He's fast. He's got good game, stand-up, ground game. His wrestling is good. Takedown defense is pretty good. So I think he can match up pretty well with anybody right now in MMA.
And again, just touching on, you know, the fight metrics of the matter. I mean, if looking at the numbers, it's even in terms of the numbers. That's the thing that really is where I think people, now again, here's the numbers again. Strikes, 60-46. Takedowns, Kennedy had 2, Rockhold had 1. Submission attempts, Rockhold had 1. And then Kennedy passed Rockhold 3 times, and, you know, Rockhold only had 2. So, I mean, if you look at the numbers, it looks like a close fight. But you're saying that from what you saw, it was all Rockhold. Yeah,
he dominated the ring. He pushed him back. He had cage presence. You know, everything the judge is looking for, so he had it. Now, Kennedy had a ton of takedown attempts, and he just couldn't get it. His fight game didn't come into fold, so he had no backup plan, and that was, I think, Kennedy's problem for the fight. He just didn't have a backup plan to go to something else, and when he got I think he kind of lost confidence in the takedowns, and he kind of started backing away, and that's when he lost the fight.
All right, so let's go ahead and move on to Nate the Great. Marquardt, he certainly was that night. He beat Tyrone Woodley, knocked him out. One of those highlight reel kind of knockouts that you would, you know, show on a loop in your house if you're, you know, bringing chicks over. That's how great it was. I mean, he was so great that there was even a question of if the final punch was necessary. So, what were your thoughts on Nate? First, in terms of that fight, and after the fight, he said he was the best welterweight in the world, which is, you know, okay. But what are your thoughts on not only how he performed, but him in terms of where he stands in the world.
Listen, the first round, you know, he got caught. He got caught by Woodley in the first round, and I thought, okay, this is going to be a pretty good fight. But listen, not only that, but he got caught another time in the fight. But Nate came back, and he picked him apart. He took Ty apart. I mean, it was a veteran against a rookie. Ty kept on backing up. Nate was just dominating the fight, putting him up against the ring, doing a little dirty boxing, throwing some sick elbows through the whole match. What I think it was that Ty Woodley is a very great fighter. I mean, the kid has some talent. He was 10-0, but don't be confused by that 10-0. I think you give him a couple more fights, and I would like to see a rematch on that. But Nate did. He just dominated the whole fight. He looked really good. Best in the world? No, I don't think so. He's not the best welterweight in the world. I think he needs to prove himself before he starts speaking like that. I mean, we know what issues he just went through. He had a 1.5-year layoff, and he comes back, and now he's saying he's the best. He needs to take it easy. He won the belt. He looked like a champion. But don't be quick to speak about being the best. I'd like to see a couple more fights in Strikeforce with him, and maybe go back to the UFC.
You know, and I agree with that. And my problem with him saying that he's the best in the world is you don't get to be the best in the world by beating Tyron Woodley. And that doesn't make you the best, no matter how great you look. I mean, if he went in there and just completely annihilated Tyron Woodley, it still doesn't make him the best 170-pounder in the world. And you know, these divisions, they have ebbs and flows, and they're saying like right now is pretty much the golden age of the 185-pound division. That's what I've heard. Now, in terms of 170, it's down a little bit. GSP's been. It's funny, these guys get hurt. You know, when Anderson was hurt, or when Kane was hurt, or these guys get hurt. It's like you forget how great the division is. You know, we haven't seen GSP fight in, it seems like, 2 years. And it hasn't been that long, but that's what I mean. They ebb and flow. So when you're a guy like Nate Marquardt, you take somebody out convincingly, and you start to forget, you know, Nate Marquardt would have a lot of problems with Carlos Condit. You know, he'd have a lot of problems with Josh Koscheck. Josh Koscheck is kind of fighting his way back. So I don't know. In terms of in the world, I agree with you. I don't think that puts him. I don't even know if I would put him. If he went to the UFC tomorrow, would he be a top 10 170-pounder?
That's a good argument. I don't know if he'd be the top 10. That welterweight division over there, you could pick anybody day of the week, and it could probably match up well against Nate. So I don't think it's gonna. I can't say he's the top 10, but he's pretty close to top 10.
All right, here's what I'm going to say to you, just so we can kind of put it in perspective, just to kind of talk on it for just another second. And it's also a good way to kind of transition into the fact that, you know, we are the Hot Cage Daily. You know, we're at a Tumblr site right now. We're moving on to a .com, working in collaboration with a site called OctagonOnly.com. I kind of want to take this opportunity because they have their ranking system. I firmly believe in their rankings, so I'm going to go ahead and read you the top 10 welterweights in the world, and you tell me if any of them are better than, or if Nate Marquardt's better than any of them. GSP, Carlos Condit, Johnny Hendricks, Martin Kampmann. After Kampmann, we got John Fitch, BJ Penn, Koscheck, Ellenberger, Brian Ebersol, Rory McDonald, Diego Sanchez, and Rick Story. Of those guys, who do you think Nate has it over? Which I'm kind of a little bit in disagreement with him here on his rankings. So I don't know if I'd put Ebersol over McDonald, but that's fine. But what do you think about Nate fitting in that group?
I would agree with you about Ebersol. That was where I would start Nate out with. And I think the rest of those guys would be a horrible matchup. Well, I wouldn't say a horrible matchup. The rest of those guys belong where they're at. They're top in the world. And any of them at any given day could be a champion. Yeah, that does. It gives you a great perspective.
In terms of, like, if tomorrow Nate Marquardt was in the UFC and he fought Rory McDonald, Diego Sanchez, or I don't know about Rick Story, but the guy that he's got ranked below Rick Story is Thiago Alves, the Pitbull. So if he fought any of those three guys, he's got a long night. He's not running through those guys like he ran through Woodley.
Yeah,
and they're at the bottom of his top 10.
Yeah.
You know? Okay.
Anyway. Long night.
Yeah. So anyway, let's move on. The other fight that kind of is of note, and there were some other ones. You know, Lorenz Larkin looked good. Ryan Couture picked up another victory. But the one I want to talk about here is the Roger Gracie-Keith Jardine fight. What are your thoughts on that fight in particular, and also Roger Gracie at 185 pounds?
Well, you could tell. Well, him dropping to 185 for this fight. Well, that's where his new class is going to be. He came down. He looked good the first couple of rounds. I mean, really good. He got Jardine on the ground. He was working submissions. He was working some ground and pound. He was changing guard positions. I mean, he had Jardine. I mean, nobody's ever tapped out Jardine, and Gracie's probably the closest one I've ever seen to doing it. But he was just all over him both the first and second round. Now, I think the weight problem, him cutting weight too quick, kind of caught up with him in the third. You can tell he was getting a little lackadaisical in the third. He was backing up a little bit. Jardine caught him a couple times. If Jardine had anything in the tank in the third, it might have been a closer fight. But I'm going to say that because of Gracie had some issues dropping weight for his first time, and he said he had done it too quick, and I believe him, he kind of got gassed out in the third one. But I mean, now that he's at 185 and he's going to probably get on a diet plan and see, he's going to be a top contender.
I agree. Now, let me ask you another question, which poses an interesting problem for our fellow 185-pounders. He's got to be the only 6'4", 185-pounder I've ever heard of. So, I mean, how do you think that works out stylistically? Is that in his favor, or is that in his? Because at 6'4", he's great on the ground, and he's a Gracie, and he's all of that. But at 6'4", you're going to have a lot of problems with a guy like Chael Sonnen. With that height and having that much body for him to deal with and take you down. Now, again, if you're Roger Gracie, are you that concerned with Chael Sonnen taking you down? Maybe not. But how do you think a 6'4", 185-pounder, how does that work for you?
Well, what I saw in this fight is, with him, my concern is the power in his hands. I didn't see really any great power that's going to keep somebody at bay or knock somebody in when they come charging in. And that's where I think his probably his downfall is, or he needs to tighten up his game a little bit. But being 6'4", and you're saying he's a Gracie, I'm sure he's going to welcome anybody taking him down. Come on, who wants to roll on the ground with you? So, but that reach can keep a lot of people at bay from shooting in. Those kicks, he has some nice kicks. He's got long legs. It's kind of like a John Jones, man. When you use your legs as a jab, you're gonna have some success.
That's true. So, okay, now I guess another question I have for you now, kind of transitioning on the heels of the Strikeforce card. You know, it was a good card, and you know, again, they are afforded the opportunity to put together these good cards. Here's the other shoe that fell on the heels of the Strikeforce card. Anderson Silva wants to fight Luke Rockhold. Why that's problematic for Anderson Silva is it came out. Dave Meltzer will give credit where credit's due, Wrestling Observer, which I'm always weirded out when I hear things from Dave Meltzer because he's a good reporter, but he does some pro wrestling stuff, and I never know what's real and what's fake and what's going on. So anyway,
wait a second. Hold on.
He reported that there are Strikeforce fighters who are on a protected list who do not, who are not able to sign as long as Zuffa is in association with Showtime and they're doing MMA. Those guys cannot sign, can never fight in the UFC. And the people that were on the list allegedly are Luke Rockhold, Gilbert Melendez, and Ronda Rousey. So now Ronda Rousey's not such a big deal because UFC shown no interest in having a women's division. But one, and it's come out, Dana White has acknowledged, he said everybody's known this in public domain, which is weird because not everybody knew it, and they were all kind of surprised by it. I think that he knew the inner workings of the deal. I don't know that there's somewhere there's a list on somebody's desk of guys that are protected. You know, they pull their drawer out and there's a list of guys that can't be, you know. I just think that it was a surprise to people. And I think that, what are your thoughts on it? Is it good for Strikeforce? Is it good for MMA? From a business perspective and a fan's perspective, what do you think?
We talked about this offline, and I told you that no way that list existed. By no means would that be a great business deal to go in, and at the time, some of your top 2 fighters in Strikeforce won't be able to move over to UFC. I said, if you're going to buy a company, you want all the assets that come with it, all the great ones and all the bad ones. That's buying a company, and then you shuffle it around, you get rid of some, get rid of the bad, get more good in. So honestly, as a business person, I have no idea how that happened. I don't know how it worked out or who was in charge of it. I'm sure it was above Dana White because I don't think he would make a decision like that because I mean, we've seen what UFC and MMA is doing right now, all because of him. I don't know how that happened, and I'm very surprised about it. Now, on a fan, I feel the same way about a fan. Uh, you can't stronghold somebody, or you don't own the rights of somebody to that extreme where you can't let them go make a living and to support the way of life by cutting them off and not letting them be able to do what they want to do. So
Okay,
I'm kind of
well,
disappointed in
let
that.
me interject here in fairness, and I don't want this to turn into and again, as the podcast and the site grows, we're going to be doing some different things. One of the things we're going to do, we talked about earlier, is the Scrum, where we're going to bring other media members in and talk about these kind of issues. And the thing that you and I are going to do, when we don't see eye to eye like this, is a piece I like to call in separate corners, where you'll be in the red corner and I'll be in the blue corner, and we'll figure it out. But because we're definitely in separate corners on this one. So,
Right.
but my point to you is, I actually think it's a great business decision, and this is why I say that. I really believe that Strikeforce is an unofficial minor leagues for the UFC. It affords them the opportunity to, quote-unquote, punish someone and send them down to Strikeforce. But I think that you can't have that if you don't have big-name fighters, because nobody's going to watch. This can't just be the retreads. It can't be this guy's not good enough to be in the UFC. There has to be someone worth watching in Strikeforce. There has to be someone that keeps you tuning in. And if Nick Diaz doesn't want to show up at press conferences, Nate Marquardt wants to, do TRT or do whatever he did, or, Anthony Johnson doesn't want to make weight, that's where you send them. And that's that's the purgatory or whatever that you send them to, where they have to then do their penance before they come back to the UFC. But there has to be someone there for them to fight. There has to be a name there. So I actually think it's good. Maybe not for the UFC, but it is good for Strikeforce to remain viable. Because if it's like nobody watches the NBA D League because they don't send guys there on rehab. They just send underdeveloped guys. So there has to be a feeder system, and it just can't be. Right now, the feeder system for the UFC is the Ultimate Fighter. And I think this is another feeder system, and I don't think they would tell you that, but that's what I believe, and I think that it's okay, and I think that, sometimes you just make the deal. If you got to make a deal with Strikeforce to get Alistair Overeem and all the guys that you wanted to do those fights, then you got to say, well, guess what? We don't get Luke Rockhold. It sucks, but we wanted to get Alistair. We didn't think he was going to get popped for PEDs, but he did. At the time we made the deal, that's what we got to do to seal the deal, is to give them Gilbert Melendez and Luke Rockhold, and so be it. So okay, that's that. But moving on, let's go ahead and hit the headlines. Even further, outside of events, a few things that we'd like to formally announce here on the Hot Cage Podcast. There are headlines that have been announced other media outlets. The UFC 153. The fight is in HSBC Arena in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, and it now has a headliner. It is going to be Jose Aldo defending his belt against Eric Koch. What are your thoughts on that fight? Briefly.
Real brief, Aldo in Brazil. That's like that home field advantage or something.
Well, didn't he ran into the crowd in Brazil, right?
Yeah.
One of the best moments in the history of UFC.
Yeah. I think it's going to be a good matchup. Aldo's tough. I mean, he's got all areas of his game. Everything is pretty much complete. Eric Koch has nothing to lose. He's going to come in. He's a tough individual. And it's going to be, if I have a feeling, it's probably going to be a stand-up game, and who's going to go down first. And I think Koch has enough in his hands that where if he can catch him a couple times, the tides might turn in that fight. But if you want me to pick it right now, I'm going to have to say Jose Aldo in Brazil.
I think so, too. And the bigger issue with this fight that I wanted to talk to you briefly, and again, we're going to preview all these fights, so I don't want to get too far into it right now. But if Jose Aldo's fighting Eric Koch right now, is there any way we can avoid Frankie Edgar moving down in weight? I mean, he's kind of getting a little more into it, and I know he wants to get that belt back, but, Jose Aldo's running out of guys. Is he not?
Hey. I was a firm believer. Yeah, send him down. You gotta send. That would be a matchup. Oh yeah, you gotta send him down for that one. I mean, Aldo is running out of guys. So, I mean, where does he go next? So, so yeah, I'd really like to see that fight.
All right, now, okay, so another fight that was announced, which is kind of, these guys are kind of shuffling a little bit, trying to get back on the winning track, is the undercard, or the co-headline, to John Jones and Dan Henderson at UFC 51 in Mandalay Bay, September 1st, is going to be Jake Ellenberger against Josh Koscheck. So what are your thoughts on that fight, briefly?
Jake, man, have you ever seen anybody who hates to lose more than Jake Ellenberger?
No,
I mean, honestly, that kid hates to lose. And Josh Koscheck's trying to make a comeback up and get his name reinstated so he can move up and challenge for the belt again. These two guys are, you know, Josh has, you either hate him or you love him, and he even said that a few times. You either love me or you hate me. I don't really care. I like Josh Koscheck. I think he has a good game. I think he's a fighter, and he's exactly where he should be. And with that fight, it's going to be a fight to the end. I think both of those guys got heart, so it's going to be a good matchup.
You know, and I think that you know, you do either love him or you hate him, and I think that he would prefer that you hate him, to be honest, because that's what makes him more money. He doesn't mind being the bad guy. He's no different than Chael Sonnen. He's no different than Brock Lesnar. They're polarizing guys. They're paid more because they're polarizing guys. Half the fans tune in to watch Koscheck win, and the other half, you know, turn in to watch him get his ass kicked. So, I mean, and that sells tickets. So, I'm not a big fan of Koscheck because I don't think he's funny like Chael, and I don't think he's, you know, I don't think he's funny like Brock either, to be honest with you. I just think that he doesn't quite understand, you know, he just makes a lot of bombastic statements to get attention, and he got straightened out by GSP, and I kind of have a feeling Ellenberger's going to straighten him out too. But that's just me. That's neither here nor there. But what I want to talk about is the main card, or the main fight of that card, which is John Jones and Dan Henderson. And the reason why I want to bring that up to you is I have some quotes for you that I want to read. Dan Henderson has uncharacteristically been doing some talking, and I'm going to read you the quotes, and I'll tell you first what Dan Henderson said. Then what John Jones said, and he's young and sloppy a little bit. He still has a lot to learn technically. My focus is to win every round, not to land the H-bomb. I'll make sure I win every round, and if I hit him good along the way, hopefully it knocks him out. A lot of people who think Jones is unbeatable have never fought before. They see what he's done from the outside. He's done well with his style, but I feel he's never fought anybody like me. My style really goes well against someone like him. I'll never go into a fight or accept a fight if I didn't think I could beat the other guy up. So that's Dan Henderson. Okay, now John Jones. No clue why Dan Henderson decided to be so disrespectful to me leading up to this fight, but it is what it is. I could use the motivation. The dude's done so much for the sport, I'm not even trying to come at him like that. I did enough trash talking with Page and Evans. FYI, Henderson's mouth isn't bothering me at all. I just figure with all his experience, he'd be over stuff like that. So what do you think about what Henderson said? Why do you think he said it? And what do you think about what Jones said?
What's wrong with what Henderson said? Because everybody's saying he's John. I mean, you exactly said. I mean, if you're interviewing me and you're asking me about John Jones and I'm fighting John Jones, I'm not going to tell you John Jones is going to whoop my ass in the fight. I'm going to tell you exactly how I plan on beating John Jones. I mean, if that's what he wants to do, if he wants to work it every round and win it and not drop the H-bomb, you know, that's what he's going to do. I don't find anything that he's John or disrespect him in any different way at all. I mean, it's just a statement.
I think what it is, and you know, again, the quote got long, and it kind of cleaned it up a little bit towards the end. I think what the media was focusing on is that he called him young and sloppy, and he had a lot to learn technically. Yeah. That's where I think that they had a problem with it. A, do you agree with that statement? And B, do you? I mean, I don't think, and no one as of yet that I've seen has really questioned Jones technically. Right.
I mean, he is young. He has still a lot to learn. He's a young fighter, and I wouldn't say he's sloppy, but there's holes in his game that he can round out. I'm sure sloppy was a bad word for Henderson using. You know, Henderson's been in the fight game for a long time, and he's just saying, hey, this guy's young. I think I can get at him, so I'm going to do it. If he gets sloppy, I'm really going to, you know, come at him.
Well, you know what I think? To be honest with you, I think that it's just a reaction to these guys are fighters. They're all, alphas. They're all that's all the case. What I think it is how many times do you need to hear you're the next one getting served up to John Jones before you start saying, wait a second, when I hang these up, I'm going into the UFC Hall of Fame. Now, if I don't go into the UFC Hall of Fame, it'll just be because I did a lot of damage in some other organizations. But I'm an MMA Hall of Famer. Let's not forget that. Yeah, this kid's great, but I was knocking kids out in Pride when this dude was, on his JV football team. So I mean, I think that's what it was. He just heard enough of that. You're the next guy to get destroyed by John Jones when he started to just say, "What? Listen, this guy's beat him, right?"
Yep. Oh, absolutely. I mean, like I said, Henderson's been in the fight game a long time, and everybody, look at the media. He's sponsored by UFC. I mean, John Jones is the poster child of MMA, and when you hear all that hype, would you not kind of get tired of it? I mean, I have nothing against John Jones, and I think he's a great fighter. I think he's going to be a champion for a long time. It's not his fault of how people are portraying him in the media. The deals he's getting, he's young, he's marketable, so you can't hate the guy for that. I mean, hell, it's a great business move for anybody. Hell, I would have jumped on board if I had an athlete like that. So don't get me wrong here. I think Henderson is getting tired of it. He's tired of the hoopla, and he's going to come in, and I don't believe his statement that he's not going to try and land the H-bomb, because I guarantee you, he's going to try and land that H-bomb.
Dude, I've never in my life seen a fight where Henderson didn't load that right up and just walk around looking to drop somebody. I've never seen that where it's not that dude. He's got that arm cocked from the word go. So the only thing I'll say about John Jones that surprised me a little bit in Henderson's statement is that he's not a hype machine. Brandon Vera was a hype machine. Before he'd really done what he needed to do, they were already talking about he's the next big thing. And they did that with Jones too, but he backed it up. I mean, that year he put together, the fact that someone other than John Jones won Fighter of the Year at the ESPYs is ridiculous, because he put together a year with beating Rampage, with beating Evans, and it may not have been a calendar year, with choking out Machida, beating Shogun. I mean, no one's ever put that kind of run together. So I don't know. I think he's earned it, but if I'm Henderson, I'd probably be like, listen, let's take it easy, guys. Okay, so moving on to the next thing, real quick. Dana White has said that George St. Pierre is on schedule for his unification bout with Carlos Condit at UFC 154. I believe the fight's in November. So we're going to get to see that fight, which a lot of fans have been waiting for. I'm a little concerned about GSP being rusty. I got my Canada shirt on just because, the fight's in Calgary. I wanted to represent, but
you're hurting my feelings
about GSP coming back.
Hey, listen, I lived by Albuquerque a couple of years, and I will have to say Carlos Condit is probably one of my favorite fighters, and I could probably go back when I started watching the WEC, and you can vouch for that. I've been on this guy's back ever since then. I think he's a great athlete. I like him as a person in the media. He's calm and collected, and he knows what he wants, and he goes and gets it. Man, I'm a big Condit fan, and I can't wait to see this fight. Not that I'm saying he's going to be GSP. I'm just telling you from the other side of the street.
And Condit's one of those guys. He's funny. He's like Forrest Griffin a little bit. He's not as quirky as he is. But the thing I like about a guy like Condit is a serious competitor. And the second that you start doubting him and making him play second banana to somebody, he can't stand it. He's like, listen, I'm a serious guy. I was a champ in WEC. That's what happened with Nick Diaz. Everybody's like, oh, Condit's just going to go in there and a lot of people disagree with the style he took for Nick Diaz, but it was the style you needed to take to beat Nick Diaz. So I think that he's a really, really serious guy, and I think that everybody just wants to kind of label him this also-ran or this silver medalist, and he's like, no, I got gold medal skills, and you guys need to take me seriously. And listen, I hate to bring this up, but when you let this happen to you, you have to live with it for the rest of your life. Mike Tyson's always going to have to answer for Buster Douglas, and George St. Pierre is always going to have to answer for Matt Serra. Matt Serra can take out George St. Pierre. Carlos Condit can take out George St. Pierre. And that's all. That's the bottom line right there. You know what I mean?
Yes, I would agree with that wholeheartedly. It's going to be a great bout.
All right, now one thing I want to talk about before we move on to the next to UFC 149 and start to preview that is I got to touch on this. It's got me super excited. It's not going to happen, so I don't know why we're wasting our time. I have got to talk about this. Rampage Jackson and Chael Sonnen.
Hey,
have you read the quotes? I don't know if you've read them. I'm going to read them to you. So
I sent you the text the other day. I said, let's do it.
Yeah.
Rampage and Chael.
No, I want to see it. I do. I really want to see it a lot. And I'm going to tell you why here in a second. Let me read you the quotes first. For those out there in cyberspace that haven't heard, Rampage Jackson and Chael Sonnen are kind of jawing. Rampage was getting interviewed by MMA Elite, I believe at the Expo, or no, it would have been after the Expo. But he was getting interviewed by MMA Elite, and this is what he told him. He sucks. I think Chael should keep his word and leave the UFC because he said that's what he'd do if he lost, and he lost horribly. Bad. Chael sucks. And then this was Chael's response in true Chael fashion. He said to keep it professional, my answer would simply be Rampage has one fight left, and it's not against me. Now, had you asked me in the streets, in my kingdom, amongst my people, well, I'm not wearing a suit and an earpiece, and if I have my sponsor's T-shirt on, my answer might have been different. I'd probably have said, hey, Rampage, why don't you stick to making box office disasters and driving the wrong way on the freeway while you're jacked up on Mountain Dew, because, Paige, you're not on my level. Now, in fairness to Chael, just to give the full quote, I think Chael actually said something there, too, about violating female MMA reporters, which was left out of this thing that I got off MMA. Those quotes were courtesy of MMA Junkie. But, yeah, I mean, they're not screwing around. They don't like each other. And Chael's talking about going to 205. And Rampage has one fight left. Now, here's my plea to the UFC. Now, I'm not going to get on my knees like a fighter and beg for a title shot, but if I would get on my knees, I would move this chair. I'll almost do what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this. I'm going to move this chair, and I'm going to get down on my knees, and I'm going to say to Dana White and Joe Silva, who probably don't listen to this podcast, but they should, please, if you guys do nothing else for me in the entire time that the UFC is in existence, I want to see Rampage Jackson and Chael Sonnen fight at 205 pounds, because as much of a UFC fan as I am, I couldn't care less about Glover Teixeira fighting anybody, much less Rampage Jackson. I would pay double the amount of a pay-per-view to watch the pre-fight press conferences with Rampage Jackson and Chael Sonnen. Never mind the fight. Never mind what I would pay for the fight. I would pay double to watch the press conferences. So, yeah. Okay, what are your thoughts on that fight, as if I even need to ask? But come on, right? I'm right. Am I not?
Oh, you were, yeah, you're so right. I mean, I would love just to have a media day with those two sitting right next to each other for about 3 hours, like a movie. You could play it like a movie and sell tickets. I mean, that would be the best shit-talking press conference that you would ever see in your life.
Here's the problem. No one ever gets the drop on Rampage. Chael Sonnen would get the drop on Rampage with shit-talking. And why that matters is because in the few times I've ever seen someone get a little bit in Rampage's head, and that basically is Rashad Evans on The Ultimate Fighter, I mean, this dude's ripping doors off. I mean, Rampage Jackson, you forget because he's kind of a fun guy, you know, and he's always joking around, that he's got an insane temper, and that's what makes him a great fighter. Like, he's a madman on some level. And Chael Sonnen would drive him bananas. Bananas. He would be bringing up the most embarrassing things about him in press conference. I mean, this guy would be putting on a show. Like, Anderson Silva didn't even give him that much meat on the bone, and he still milked it for 4 years almost. Busting Anderson Silva's balls. Rampage Jackson, who motorboated an MMA reporter, Karen Bryant, and who humped a Japanese reporter, who dry humped a Japanese reporter. You're telling me that Chael Sonnen would not go crazy? I love Rampage. And Chael Sonnen would have a blast with Rampage Jackson in pre-fight. They have to do this fight. They have to. We need to start some sort of Twitter campaign or whatever it is. It has to happen.
Let's do it. I'm all on board for that.
Dude, it would be legendary. Anyway, Okay, so let's move on. Let's give this its due and properly introduce it. It is UFC 149. It is happening in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. It's happening tomorrow night. Uriah, the California Kid Faber, is taking on Renan Barão. Renan Barão of the 29-fight winning streak. Uriah Faber of the former WEC champion. How excited are you about this card?
I'm excited. It's not the fight I wanted to see, but it's going to live up to the hype. Uriah Faber is on a mission. He wants to win the belt, even though it's an interim belt. He wants to win the belt so he can fight Cruz again and unify it. But I think we might see tomorrow night the best Uriah Faber we've ever seen. I mean, he came in 135. He looked great. His Team Alpha Male is leveling people. I'm excited. Can you tell? I don't know if you can tell because I'm excited.
And you should be. And in fairness, and you should be. And here's the thing. There's a lot riding on this, and you and I kind of touched on this in a thing that we wrote up kind of collaboratively for the Hot Cage Daily. Is that this is it for Uriah? I mean, it is in a sense, and for the fans, of which you and I are both, of those ranks. Why I say that is this: I would much rather see Cruz Faber 3 than Cruz Barão 1.
Yep. Because
if Cruz wins Cruz Faber 3, I'm gonna see Cruz Barão 1. So I mean, This is huge, and and kind of a thing, and we'll make the article available in long form on Hot Cage Daily tomorrow. But kind of what I put in there is that if you ask fighters about their legacy, they all say the same thing. Not for me to decide, for someone else to decide, and I'll think about all that stuff when I retire. Well, guess what? I completely disagree with that, and this is why. It is for you to decide, and you decided in the ring. You decided in the octagon. And if you wait till you're done, then the opportunity is lost. And so Uriah Faber needs to understand the gravity of tomorrow. If he wins this fight tomorrow and goes on to fight Cruz, he's in, he's a legend. Now he's got a good legacy. He does, and he was a huge fighter in the lower weight classes. But tomorrow night is an incredibly huge fight for Uriah Faber's legacy.
Yeah, that's like you were talking about the article. I mean, I watched the weigh-in today, and I immediately wrote that article because I am a huge fan of Uriah Faber on many different levels since I've been watching WEC. The kid has put the lower weight classes on the map because of his time in the WEC. People like him, and I mentioned Jens Pulver too. That's when you were back then, when you were mentioning smaller people, smaller wrestlers, the weight classes, those guys are the ones who put it on the map. I think his legacy tomorrow will be defined a little bit more, but I think he deserves tomorrow night. And I know, hey, we're just two fans talking this, and people might disagree with us, but deep down, I'm a firm believer good things happen to good people. And tomorrow night, I think he deserves a win.
And in fairness, it's not to say Renan Barão's not a good person, but I get where you're going with it.
Yeah.
It's that you're right. Uriah has put himself in position, and he has, much in the same way Randy Couture did. I mean, he did all the right things. He was a huge ambassador. I mean, Uriah Faber, since he's joined the UFC, I've seen more Twitter pictures of that dude on Dana White's private jet. Him and Kenny Florian are like stewardesses on the jet. So I mean, that's the thing that they really have done what they need to do in terms of being ambassadors for the sport. But again, Renan Barão doesn't care about any of that.
No.
He's going out there to take Uriah Faber's head off, and if Uriah Faber doesn't come in there ready to go, this is his moment, and everything's set up for him to have that moment. But Renan Barão would like nothing more than to ruin that. He doesn't care about Uriah Faber's legacy. He damn sure don't care about Cruz Faber 3. So, Uriah Faber needs to do what needs to be done. He's handled business,
And let me tell you, it's not going to be an easy fight. Don't get me wrong. Renan Barão is one bad cat in that ring, man. he's a monster. I mean, if you watch some of his other fights, I mean, he comes in and he dominates. He's got kicks, he's got takedowns, he's got jiu-jitsu. I mean, the guy can fight. He's tough. I'm excited about the fight. It's not going to be no easy fight for either one of them. And I think it's going to be. It could be fight of the night tomorrow night. Could be.
Oh, without a doubt, it could be. I mean, neither one of these guys is going to give this up easily. Now, a lot's been made of the Burrell win streak. You know, in terms of his last 4 fights, I got a win over Jurgensen, I got a win over Brad Pickett, I got a win over Cole Escobedo, and I got a win over Chris Carriasso. Now the win over Jurgensen was a decision. He submitted Pickett, decision over Escobedo, and he submitted Carriasso. So I mean, yes, he has this long winning streak. And again, Dana White said this, and I'll echo his sentiments. You beat that many guys in a row, it doesn't matter what level you're on. I mean, that's impressive. You know, the fact that Anderson Silva hasn't lost in 6 years is impressive. It was an interesting quote today. They asked Bisping, you know, just a quick sidebar. They asked Bisping, what do you think about Anderson Silva potentially greasing, you know, up at the last fight? And Bisping goes, he hasn't lost a fight in 6 years, and he's been the champ the whole time. I don't think that's because he greased his chest. So that's very similar to Renan Barão in this respect. You don't beat that many guys just because, you know, they all suck. You know, you're doing some things. You're taking guys out who you know, they train like you. They you know, they're coming in there prepared as well. So now in terms of Uriah's recent history with fights, you know, submitted Brian Bowles with the guillotine, lost the decision to Cruz, which some agree with, some disagree with. Decision over Eddie Wineland, and then rear naked choked Mizugaki, and then, you know, lost the decision to Jose Aldo. So that's his last 5 fights. So, I mean, in terms of opponents, obviously Uriah Favors has been a lot better. So, but again, that doesn't mean anything. That's just the opportunities that Barão had. So I know that your heart's telling you that Uriah Favors is going to take it tomorrow night, but Barão's still the favorite. So how do you think it's going to play out?
I don't know. I'm having a hard time because my heart does say go with Faber. Barão's younger. He's got some good stand-up game, good takedown game. He's got good submission. But I'm going to go with my heart because that's what it's going to take to win tomorrow night. So I'm going to say Faber is going to take it tomorrow night.
Yeah, and again, it's hard when you're an MMA reporter like we are. You're in the media, and also you're a fan, and you've been a fan for a while. I mean, Barão's just kind of showing up to the party. You know, he's a young guy. He's 25. You want to pull for Uriah. You know, you kind of want to see it happen. Just real quick on the tail of the tape, they're both 5'6", both 135 pounds. Barão's got 1 inch more of reach. They both fight orthodox, but, you know, Barão's 8 years younger. So I think Uriah has his stance is orthodox. His fighting style is very unorthodox. So I think that's maybe what it takes to get Barão. Now, the thing I will say is Barão's out of the Aldo camp. Okay? Yeah. And Uriah had a lot of trouble with Aldo. A lot of trouble. I mean, Aldo kicked that boy's legs until the next day. Remember when we looked at those pictures on Twitter? It looked like somebody took a bat to that kid's thighs. So, do you think Barão has the same skills that Aldo does? Maybe not to that level, but I mean. No,
not in that game. No, I think Aldo was a special kid with that stand up and the legs and that game. Barão, I think he's got some hands, but I think honestly, I think if he gets him on the ground, and I think he might let Uriah take him down and try to work a submission from underneath. That's just my thought.
And he may. And the thing that I'll give Uriah in terms of getting a takedown is he's always moving for the pass. You know, he never kind of lets it. He never kind of just is content with a takedown. I don't think that he's lazy enough to get sucked into a submission. Not that he's never been submitted, but you know what I'm saying?
Right. Yep.
All right, let's move on to the next fight. It's Tim Boetsch. You know okay, Tim Boetsch versus Hector Lombard. Let's get to the tail tape a little bit earlier with these guys than we did with the previous fight. Lombard's 5'10", 185 pounds. He's a southpaw, 34 years old. Tim Boach, 6 foot, 185 pounds, 74-inch reach. He fights orthodox. He's 31. Now, Boach is coming off the huge victory over Yushin Okami, and, you know, Lombard's coming over from Bellator. So what are your thoughts on this fight and how it's played out? Now, I will say this before you start. Watching the weigh-ins today, Hector Lombard was shot out of a goddamn cannon. Like, he looked like he was ready. I wrote a little thing on OctagonOnly.com and our site as well, where I kind of, you know, chronicled the weigh-ins, and I put in my piece that I thought that Lombard was going to knock out Burt Watson walking up the stage. I was like, I think Burt Watson's going to catch a right hook if he doesn't keep those hands up. So, I mean, he was ready to go. And that doesn't mean you're going to win. It's not, you know, Clay Guida's ready to go every weigh-in. That doesn't mean shit. So, what are your thoughts on this fight?
I'm interested to see this matchup. Hector Lombard's coming over from Bellator. You know, he dominated Bellator. He's had some great matches. He's what does he have? 2 losses on his record.
Yeah.
And I think his last loss really was against Musashi back in 2006. Other than that, I mean, he's kind of ran through some people now, but this is the big stage. It's the UFC, and Tim Boach is no joke. So these two dudes are going to stand up in front of each other and throw until somebody goes down. And I'm very interested to see his style in the UFC. I want to kind of see how he handles the first-time fight, his nerves. We're going to see a lot in that first couple minutes. If we get to see the first couple minutes, it's going to tell us a lot. I think he has good cage presence. He can work the cage. But on the other side of that, Tim Boach he's an animal, man, and that dude has some heavy hands. And I don't know how I can call this fight, but it's going to be a good fight.
And, you know, and that's the thing. And sometimes the mistake that people make in UFC, and I'll put myself in that category, is that you see a guy and you start to make judgments about who he is as a fighter based on kind of what you're seeing. I mean, Tim Boach is not the most impressive fighter that ever stepped in the octagon. I mean, to me, he looks like, you know, Matt Hasselbeck got a hold of some carbs, you know, over a weekend, and it was a wrap. He started eating breadsticks, you know, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. But, I mean, that guy, Yushin Okami, not somebody that doesn't come ready. And Yushin Okami is legit. I mean, Yushin Okami is problematic for a lot of guys, and Tim Boach ended his night. And the thing I'll say about Hector Lombard, though, is when you look at his record, he's only lost to studs. You know, he lost to Musashi, who's kind of fallen off lately. He lost to Kirigono. I mean, these are guys that are legit guys. So, I mean, he can't control that he's just not getting to the UFC. You know, he was contractually obligated wherever he was. But if you look up and down his record, a lot of ones, man, underneath the round. A lot of KOs. A lot of KOs for punches.
Yep.
You know, and this guy's going in there to take guys' heads off, and he can't control when he got to the UFC. He's there now. And he wants Anderson Silva. Although, interestingly enough, he said if he wins, he wants to fight Mark Munoz. And Dana White had the greatest line. He goes, I don't know if Hector Lombard gets Fuel TV, but Mark Munoz just lost to Chris Weidman, so I don't know why he wants to fight him. But it was a funny line and whatever. I don't know why he doesn't want to fight Anderson Silva. I don't know what that's about. But whatever. If he beats Tim Boach convincingly, he'll be fighting Anderson Silva whether he wants to fight him or not. But yeah, these guys are serious business, man, and they're going in there to make a mark. I guarantee you that Tim Boach goes in there and takes out Hector Lombard, he'll be calling out Anderson Silva like Chris Weidman was. So he probably won't get him, but he'll be calling him out. So what's your take? What's your prediction on this fight?
You know, I'm taking Hector's first, you know, ring appearance in the UFC, but I'm going to go ahead and call it. I think Boach is not going to. I think Boach will win the fight. I don't know if. Yeah, I'll go ahead and say it. TKO. I think he will. I think he's got heavy hands. He's on a good roll right now. He's confident. He's going to go in there. He looked great in the weigh-in, man. And I think he's going to go work up a stand-up, and I think he's going to knock him out.
Taking Tim Boach. Wow, man. You might want to take that to Vegas. I will say this. I think that I don't disagree with you. Now, another thing Dana White said in the presser was that, you know, octagon jitters are a real thing. And this is the first time he's ever fought in the UFC.
Oh.
The biggest crowd he's ever been in front of. Canadian fans are out of their minds for the UFC. And actually, like I said, we're working in collaboration with the Octagon Only, and you know, we're hotcagedaily.tumblr.com, and the guy that runs Octagon Only is a Canadian guy, and I kind of want to get him on one of these podcasts, and get in. You want to get in separate corners. I want to see who he thinks is our bigger MMA fan. You know, Americans or Canadians, because those Canadians, man, they're crazy. I've been to fight. We've both been to fights where there's Canadian guys, and they're pretty serious. So the only reason why I bring that up is Lombard's gonna, you know, he's gonna have a lot to contend with. And I'm gonna go ahead and coin a term right now, as opposed to Octagon jitters. And I don't know if anybody's ever said this before. If they have, I apologize for taking this. Maybe we're just like-minded folks. But I think that the first time you fight in the UFC, you get a case of cage fright. I think that's what I'm going to call it, and that's what I think it is, man. You get in there, and you just don't know what to do. I mean, it's a huge stage, and you know everybody's watching, and you know there's a chance that you're about to get embarrassed in front of a lot of people, and it's going to be a big deal.
Yep. I would agree. I like that. Cage fright. I'm going to have to go with that one.
All right, let's stick with it. So let's get our the Hot Cage Daily legal team on sewing that up for us. All right, so the last one we're going to take a look at. We might hit the other fights kind of abstractly, but next we're going to talk about Sean Jordan and Czech Congo. Now on paper, this looks like, why are these guys even fighting? And you know, I want to know what your thoughts are. You know, should they be fighting? Do we have a Cody McKenzie, Chad Mendes situation on our hands, or do you think that Sean Jordan's a little more serious than that?
Well, Jordan coming out of Jackson camp, I mean, do you know any fighter that's ever come out of Jackson camp that wasn't really prepared for a fight?
Other than Melvin Gillard, mentally, no. but yeah, no, you're right. They come out, they're ready, man. Jackson gets them going.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a true test for Jordan. It's going to be a great matchup. You know, Congo comes to fight. He's just a monster, man. He's a big dude. He's got some good stand-up game, and Jordan's first test as Czech Congo was going to be a big test, man. And I don't know how he's going to react, but if I'm guessing, well, Jackson said he was the best heavyweight athlete he's ever seen. And I know you're hyping your fighter a little bit, but if that's true, then I'm going to have to get on that band camp, because if he is the best athlete he's ever seen, then I'm excited about tomorrow night. I don't know how I'm going to call this fight yet, but it's an interesting fight.
Now, in fairness to Greg Jackson's statements, they don't really produce great heavyweights at Jackson.
Yeah.
I mean, wasn't Tim Sylvia a Jackson fighter? So if that's your bar, then you know, then okay, I can understand that. But he's a great athlete. He is, and the comeback against Pat Barry was amazing. Nothing short of it. You know, I mean, he was on, you know, I don't know if the politically correct term, Queer Street applies, but that guy was out. I mean, he was out. He was seeing stars, and it was a wrap, and he came back. And just to tell the tape real quick, he's 6'4", 240, 82 inches of reach, which is a huge advantage over Sean Jordan. He fights orthodox, 37 years of age. It's funny, you don't really ever talk about Congo's age, but he's up there. Now, on Jordan's side, he's 6 foot, 260 pounds, so he's 20 pounds heavier than Congo. I think he came in about 17 pounds heavier at the actual weigh-in. He fights southpaw, and he's 27. Now, in terms of the reach, I said it was a huge advantage. It's 8 inches. So
that's a huge
I don't know.
advantage.
Again, you said that you're not ready to call this fight. Real quick, I just want to tell you some interesting things that happened this week with Congo in terms of the press conferences. Two funny things that happened with him is, one, somebody asked him what he thought about being a gatekeeper and if he felt as if he was a gatekeeper. And the thing that's kind of running around the internet now is that he maybe thought that was a derogatory term because he was black and he didn't kind of grasp what the gatekeeper thing meant, or maybe he was just offended by being called a gatekeeper. It's not exactly a flattering term, but that was one funny thing that happened. And then I think of because he's French, and one of the French reporters asked him what he thought about maybe moving down to 205 pounds, which he's 240 now. And they were like, you know, since these fighters in the heavyweight division are so heavy, if you thought about moving to 205, and he goes, I like food a little too much to go to 205. And I was like, dude, guy weighs 240. You want to get him down to 205? Jesus Christ. So, what do you think about those two statements?
That's hilarious. 205. That dude is cut like a brick house, man. I couldn't see him going to 205. He'd have to starve himself for a year. it just wouldn't happen.
He'd look like Joey Beltran. Remember when we saw Joey Beltran? And everybody's like, "Who's this? Is this like Jimmy Beltran, his 205-pound brother, or what happened to Joey?" So, all right,
Exactly.
so let me get your thoughts on the fight, aside from the hijinks at the press conference.
Uh, you know, I'm gonna go with experience in this. You know, Jordan's a young guy coming into this match. I don't know if he's up to the expectation of what Congo is gonna bring to the ring. I could be wrong. I'm kind of leaning towards Congo here.
Me too. And again, you know, we were there the night that Mike Russo knocked out Todd Duffy. So I mean, anybody can, you know, and Todd Duffy was.
Right.
Everybody was at the night we watched that fight. Everybody was kind of portraying Todd Duffy as this is a really, really cut, super athletic Brock Lesnar. I mean, this guy's he means business. And then Russo just took him out, and Todd Duffy, you know, you never hear from him again. So I think that it'll be interesting. I'm taking Congo as well, just because I think he's legit, and I'm not too impressed with Sean Jordan, but you know, Joe Silva, man. You know, Dana White says it all the time. How can you say the guys are outmatched until they fight?
Yep.
I'll agree with him on that. And Silva knows a hell of a lot more about putting fights together than I do. So from that perspective, I'll give it to him. Now, looking at the rest of this card, is there any other fights that kind of stick out to you that have your interest? From my perspective, I like the Matt Riddle-Chris Clemens fight. I like Nick Ring and Court McGee. And that's about it. Ryan Jimmo and Anthony Parash kind of has my eye a little bit. But what fights kind of have your attention, other than the ones we talked about?
The Riddle fight, because those two guys are going to come and bang. I mean, I don't think I've seen a fight the Riddle wasn't in that wasn't a fight. He has a good chin. He loves to bang. And the press conference annex when they're both wearing shades, you know, and it's the coolest. What did he say? What did Rogan say about that?
Coolest stare down ever.
Yeah, I think these two guys, they love what they do, and it's great. It's going to be a good fight. I think that one could have a knockout of the night or the fight of the night.
Yeah, I agree. And, you know, those are a couple of guys, man. You know, you get these fights every once in a while. Marcus Davis used to give them to you. These guys could be the next generation of guys that are just going to go in there and say, you know, it's kill or be killed.
Yeah.
You know, that some guys are that way. Some guys go in there saying it's kill or be killed. The other one that kind of has me interested is Court McGee and Nick Ring. Obviously, Court McGee looked very legit on the Ultimate Fighter. He won it. And, you know, he's looked good. You know, after that he lost to Costas Philippou. Most recently, and then Nick Ring lost to Bosch, but Ring's Canadian. He's kind of coming off this kind of weird thing where he was some kind of crime fighter, and everybody's kind of pumped up for him. So, you know, you never can tell how guys are going to fight in their own country, but I like this fight a lot.
Don't quote me too much on this, but isn't Bret the Hitman Hart walking out with him tomorrow night?
That is, I'll absolutely quote you on that. He is being walked out by Bret the Hitman Hart. That has been confirmed by multiple media outlets. He's going to be walked out.
How can you pick against him? He's coming against the Hitman, man. I mean, come on. Going back when I was a kid watching wrestling on Saturday nights and watching the Bret the Hitman Hart take out some people, how can you go against him?
The only thing that would make it even, and again, the lines between MMA and pro wrestling get blurred sometimes. And I don't want to. Believe me, I'm not going to try and engage in doing that. I like the fact they're separate entities, and I like the division of them, just like I like the way MMA and boxing are divided. But if Nick Ring put Court McGee in a sharpshooter, I got to be honest with you, that probably would make my night. You know, and if my main card was normal, and Nick Ring dropped a sharpshooter out there, I think I'd have to. The fact that I even remember that Bret Hart did the sharpshooter is, you know, whatever.
Hey, that was back when we were kids. That's all the fighting we could watch when we were kids.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, the card, you know, the card is looking like, you know, it's shaping up to be a monster. I mean, it was going to be one of the bigger cards in UFC history, and again, the injury gods have had their way with it, but the UFC's stacked with fighters, and they seem to just recover. So, I mean, occasionally we'll get these cards where they're kind of a little under-promised, under-touted, and, you know, unfortunately, again, as Dana White said publicly, some card had to be the card that was after Sonnen and Silva. Something had to be the next one.
Right.
You know, somebody has to follow up. Whatever. You know, there's got to be a Godfather 2 and all that. So unfortunately, this is the next card. And,
yeah, I'm looking forward to it too.
I agree, me too. So again, just let me get your final thoughts on what you think about this card, how stoked you are, and we'll close this thing out.
Based on this card, there's a lot of great matchups in this that can be a lot of good fights. I don't know if anybody's going to really stand out and make the move to a title shot coming out of this fight besides the headliner, but underneath the fights, they're good matchups, and they're going to put on some good fights. I'm interested to see the card tomorrow night, and I think it's going to be worth the money.
Yeah, I agree completely, and I think that it is going to be a good card, and I think that the Barao Faber fight was a little bit under. Barao's not a huge name. I mean, he's a serious guy, but he's not a huge name. So I think people were kind of a little down on that. So you got Faber fighting kind of not a nobody. I mean, obviously, but not a lesser known guy. You got Hector Lombard fighting a lesser known guy. You got, I mean, it seems like it's kind of a weirdly stacked deck, but I think it's going to be a big night. I think that we're going to get a lot of clarity on the 185-pound division. Dana White's already said that. So I'll be glued to the post-fight press conference for that. We'll obviously give you coverage of that afterwards. We're going to do our regular stuff afterwards, our post-fight stuff. So, I'm excited for this fight. I know you are. It's going to be a good card, as always. They always deliver. And sometimes, guys on lesser cards are looking to make a name for themselves, so we'll see. And there's always bonuses to be collected, and somebody's got to get them, so they're going to go out and get them. So,
That's right.
All right, so for TJ Craig, co-editor of the Hot Cage Daily, I'm John Franklin. Keep it glued to the Hot Cage Daily. Our Twitter feed at the Hot Cage Daily. Also, OctagonOnly.com. Their Twitter feed at OctagonOnly.com. And we'll see you after the fights. Enjoy them.
All right. Thanks.